You to our 8th edition of Gridiron Glory. I'm Alexander Cook. Cole Wolfgang unable to make it today. And let's take a look at the big games from this week on Saturday. Let's start with number 25, Washington State, taking on Arizona. And this was a complete blowout. Washington State won 69-7. They've been looking really good in the latter half of the season. Then we have number 22, Florida State, on the road to take on NC State, Carter Finley Stadium. It was a very close game, but eventually Florida State was able to pull away and get the win. Then we had number 21, North Carolina, taking on Georgia Tech, and North Carolina won big, 48-20. And some very good teams in the ACC Coastal Division that will probably play Clemson. I assume they'll win out. So I have right now a Clemson versus North Carolina rematch in the ACC championship game on December 3rd. Then we had number 20, West Virginia, playing Kansas, and Kansas is terrible. What more do I need to say? West Virginia wins 48-21. Then Virginia Tech, number 19 in the nation, sliding away from Duke, which kept things close. Virginia Tech, the Hokies, able to win 24-21, and a very close game there. Then we had number 18, Oklahoma State, taking on Kansas State. And this one was a very good game to watch. Several lead changes, but in the end, Oklahoma State got the job done against Kansas State. And good performance by both teams. And Kansas State stopped on a 2nd and goal with a few seconds left. And it was from about the 20-yard line, so there's not much of a chance, but a great game over in the Big 12. And then number 17, Baylor, hosting TCU, and Baylor fell again, the second time this year already, 2 consecutive losses as TCU took down Baylor 62-22. They crushed them. And Baylor should be out of the college football playoff rankings come Tuesday. We'll have a show about that as usual. And then we had Iowa taking on Penn State, number 12 in the nation. I thought this one would be close, but in the end, it was not. Number 12, Penn State obliterated Iowa Beaver 41-14. A very good team the Nittany Lions look like. And they're technically in contention for the Big Ten title game, but not exactly sure that they'll make it with Ohio State playing at the high level now that they are. We'll talk about that game in a little bit. And then, of course, Michigan, has been playing at a high level for quite some time. And then we had number 11, Florida, taking on Arkansas, and Arkansas with a huge win over the Gators, 31-10 at Fayetteville, and a much-needed win for Brett Bielema's squad. And then we have number 9, Auburn, taking on Vanderbilt. Apparently, the Auburn quarterback, who's had a lot of success lately, Sean White, was not able to play, so they put James Franklin in, the transfer from Florida State, and Franklin did not look good. It was a very tight first half. Then Sean White goes in there. There's more momentum, but still a very close game. Auburn ended up pulling away 23-16. But we'll talk about the implications of this in just a second. Then we have number 8, Wisconsin, on the road against Northwestern. They've lost their last 4 at Ryan Field, which is in Evanston, Illinois, the home of the Wildcats. Low attendance there normally, but it looked like a pretty solid day yesterday. And Wisconsin, a nice win. Wisconsin's not the team that's going to go in there and they're just going to beat you down like a drum. But their defense comes up big. They need to work on their offense if they're going to be competitive against teams like, say, Ohio State, Michigan. And right now, they're number 1 in the West, so they're most likely to take on Ohio State or Michigan when that time comes around. But if they want to be really competitive, they're going to have to start doing better on that offensive side. Their defense is perfect, but their offense just needs to get better. Of course, their first win at Ryan Field in 4 visits. Of course, the first of those 4 in 2000. So, not many visits to Ryan Field, but Wisconsin has not had any luck there. And if you'll think back to last year, Wisconsin lost in a last-minute thriller. Yeah, a touchdown that was overturned. And just a big loss for Wisconsin over at Camp Randall last year. But this year, they do get the win. Looking like a pretty solid team. They just need to improve once again on that offensive side. Number 7, Louisville. If you will think back, they barely fended off Virginia last week. This final score, that was 32-25. This week, Louisville was big again, taking on a terrible Boston College team, and they went 52-7. The problem with Louisville trying to get into that playoff hunt is not that they're not good. It's that you've had all these close wins against tiny opponents, and they don't really play any big opponent. Now, they beat Florida State, but Florida State hasn't really been that great, and that's not as huge of a win as if, say, they beat Clemson and they were undefeated. Then they'd certainly be in that college football playoff top 4 right now. But because they really don't play anybody, it's going to be tough for them to get into the playoff. And now let's go to number 5, Washington, taking on Cal. And Washington with a good win, 66-27. Washington looking like a solid team, hoping to get the Pac-12 back in the college football playoff for the first time since the inaugural college football playoff back in 2014. So a good win for the Huskies, and next week they're going to face a big test, and I mean a big test, because guess who they're facing? A solid USC team. That'll be 7:30 p.m. Eastern on Fox, and that will be huge. So USC is not in our top 25, but let's just go over their huge win at home at the LA Memorial Coliseum against the Oregon Ducks, which have been really terrible this year. A 45-20 win, so a very intriguing game over in the Pac-12 next week. But let's go to number 4, Texas A&M right now. And Mississippi State has not been good this year, but somehow they upset the Aggies 35-28 at home. Of course, Trevor Knight unfortunately was injured, and that had a lot to do with it. But a solid big win for Mississippi State. And because of that win, Auburn is suddenly controls their own destiny. Let's say they win out. Even if Alabama wins out, then Auburn will, assuming they beat Alabama, they will be in the SEC championship game taking on some team. It's really hard to talk about the SEC East right now. They're just not that strong. The West, extremely strong, but the East, it's hurting the SEC. SEC as a whole, in my opinion, the best conference in all football, and it makes the Big Ten look better. Of course, the Big Ten West not that strong, but that's a conversation we'll be looking at a little bit later. A very big topic there. What's the best Power 5 conference in football? And certainly a very intriguing thing to look at. Then we have number 3, Michigan, taking on Maryland, which was 5-3 coming in. Well, guess what? They're 5-4 now. Michigan obliterates. They just destroy Maryland 59-3. It's not fun to see Michigan cruising past all these bad teams, and you want to see them play a big team, and that's where Ohio State comes in. Of course, Iowa is their next opponent, but Iowa did not look too good against Penn State, which is starting to look like a really good team. Then number 2, Clemson, shutout again at Memorial Stadium, Death Valley against Syracuse, 54-0. And they're really looking good. And that's another reason I think it's going to be hard for Louisville to get in there. unless Clemson loses, and it does not look like they will, I don't have enough confidence in Louisville that they'll get in to the playoff. But I do have confidence in Lamar Jackson. We'll talk about the Heisman race a little bit later. And now let's take a look at our two big top 25 games. First, a top 10 showdown. Nebraska on the road at the Horseshoe against Ohio State. And Ohio State ran all over, literally, Nebraska 62-3. Of course, unfortunately, Tommy Armstrong injured in that game. Luckily, he's okay, and it's hard, and we're not sure if he's going to be able to play yet. And of course, all this changes on a day-by-day basis, but we do pray for the best for such an inspirational person to me and many, many others, a leader on this Husker football team. And we certainly hope he'll be coming back next week. Luckily, we saw him on the field against Ohio State, so things look okay. He was briefly knocked unconscious. He seemed to fall on the ball, so not good, but we think he's okay. We hope he's okay. And hopefully next week for the Huskers, he'll be back. And now let's take a look at our other top 25 matchup. Number 1, Alabama coming to the other Death Valley. LSU Tigers stay in one of the hardest places to play in all of college football, if not the hardest place to play in all college football. Alabama shuts out LSU, a huge win by a tiny margin, 10-0. No team scored any points for the first three quarters. Both defenses were lights out. But the play calling for LSU especially just got repetitive. It just got bad. It was not good. And eventually, because the LSU defense is on the field so long, how well that Alabama defense is playing to force the LSU offense off the field, it just wore out LSU, and it allows Jalen Hurts to pop into the end zone. Then you have Danny Etling throwing an interception, and the Tide just lets the clock tick for a long, long time before putting a field goal on the board, and they secure a 10-0 win against LSU. And that's it for your college football recap, and let's talk about the implications of all this, namely in the Big Ten and the SEC. Now, let's start with the Big Ten. Because Nebraska lost, right now Wisconsin it looks like Wisconsin's going to be in that Big Ten championship. Right now, they're number 1 in the West. But let's take a look at their schedule. Next week, they're at home, Camp Randall, against Illinois. Easy win. Then they're going to take on Purdue on the road. Easy win. Then they're going to face Minnesota at home. Easy win. So it looks like Wisconsin's in position to secure winning the Big Ten West and facing what looks to be either Ohio State or Michigan, both playing really good football at this point. But let's take a look at Nebraska's schedule, and not that really matters anymore. Right now they've fallen to 3rd in the West, and they face Minnesota, should be a win, Maryland a win. Iowa might be a little hard, that's on the road. And let's see who's number 2 in the West. In the West at this point in the Big Ten West standings. And you've actually got at number 2 in the West. I might be able to think Nebraska would be there right now, but it's actually Minnesota. They've got the exact same record as Wisconsin, but once again, both of Wisconsin's losses came from the Big Ten East. But let's take a look at where both of Minnesota's losses came from. And so their losses, the Golden Gophers, came from their losses came from Penn State and Iowa. Of course, one of them in the Big Ten East, which is why they're currently second in the West. But if they can get a win at Camp Randall against Wisconsin, then they're in the driver's seat for the West. I just don't see that happening. But right now, it looks like Wisconsin is going to win the West. But who's going to win the SEC West? Well, that's a good question because right now Auburn controls their own destiny. So does Alabama. Even if Alabama wins out until the Iron Bowl, so does Auburn. Then if Auburn wins the Iron Bowl, then they're in the SEC championship game due to Mississippi State's upset of Texas A&M. A&M needed one more loss. Now they have 2 losses. Now, of course, one of Auburn's losses came from non-conference, so they just be represented as one loss, get that one against Alabama, and then Auburn in the SEC championship game. But the other question right now, in the weak, and I mean a weak SEC East, who is in the driver's seat? Well, let's take a look. Because Kentucky lost, if they had won, they would be number 1 in the East. Florida still remains in number 1 in the East despite their loss. And it's just a very weak conference. You've got Missouri at 0-5 in conference, Vanderbilt 1-4, and by the way, that's Missouri number 7, Vanderbilt number 6, Tennessee 2-3 in the conference. That puts them at number 5. South Carolina moving up 3-4 in the conference. That puts them number 4. Georgia 3-4 in the conference. That puts them at number 3. And here are the 2 winning records in the conference. The SEC East. Kentucky at 4-3. If they had that one win against Georgia, then they would be number 1 once again. But then Florida is 4-2 in the conference, which puts them at number 1 in a weak SEC East. My prediction, I think we're going to see let's take a look at both Florida's schedule and Kentucky's schedule. Now, we know Kentucky's got a hard test on the road against Louisville. Yes, on the road against Louisville. They face Tennessee next week. Not sure they can win that, but it's going to be hard for Florida because they got to face LSU and Florida State. I actually think that Florida's going to lose to LSU. That puts them. They're going to win against South Carolina next week. That puts them at 7-2. Then they're going to lose to LSU. That puts them at 7-3. And those are just losses, of course, within the conference. So you have 3 losses within the conference. Kentucky's losses have all fell in the conference. And I think they're going to be second because of that head-to-head loss against Florida. I think they're going to lose. I think they're actually going to win against Tennessee, and then they're going to win against Austin Peay, the tiny school they're playing. And then you're going to see them lose to Louisville. But because they lost in that head-to-head matchup against Florida, even though I think Florida is going to lose to LSU and Florida State, I think you're going to see Florida, not the best team, not the strongest team, not the greatest team, facing off against either Alabama or Auburn in the SEC title game. But let's talk about how Auburn played against a terrible Vanderbilt team. They didn't look good at all. So right now, I'd have to give the advantage to Alabama. Strong win in Death Valley, perhaps the hardest place to play in all of college football. Right now, I'm going to have to go with number 1 in the SEC West, Alabama, number 2, Auburn. I think Auburn has a chance if they can get their running back, who they lost. It's Austin Petway, the tailback for the Tigers. They need him back. They need Sean White back. They need them both healthy. And then if they can get them both healthy, then I might reconsider that prediction that Alabama's going to face off in a rematch against Florida. And then I think whoever wins the SEC West is going to beat Florida. Florida, they have defense, but their offense is just not enough to beat these marquee top-tier teams. So that's my prediction. Now let's take a look at the Heisman race. And in the Heisman race, of course, Lamar Jackson, huge win over the Boston College Eagles. He looked dynamic, and that's the key thing. He's not necessarily you're not playing the best team in the nation, but this actually helps your Heisman bid because you're playing these tiny teams and you're winning big. And right now, number 2, it's Jake Browning, and he's looked really lights out for Washington. And then we have number 3, Deshaun Watson. He did a great job. And then number 4, Jabril Peppers. And the thing about Jabril is that he plays so many spots, but he's not. Sometimes he can affect the game, but he's not like the dynamic quarterback that can totally the game. And then a really lights out running back for San Diego State, Donald Pumphrey, and he's at number 5. He's pretty good. And look, I think Peppers has a chance to get in that top 3. Right now, I've got to go with Jackson, number 1. I've got to go with, and personally, this is ESPN's expert poll. That's what they show. I think at the end of the year, it's going to be Jackson, number 1. Number 2, it's actually going to be Watson. I think he's going to look really good. Number 3, I've got Browning. Number 4, Peppers, and number 5, Pumphrey. Just the problem that I have with Pumphrey is that he's playing for a smaller school that doesn't really play all those top-tier teams and doesn't really have a chance in the college football playoff, especially with a loss, or even a New Year's Six Bowl. And then Jabril Peppers, it's just, if he has a big day against Ohio State, and that's a very good team, if he affects the outcome, if he looks lights out playing all those positions, then you can maybe make the case for number 2 or number 3. But right now, I'm content with number 1, Lamar, number 2, Deshaun, number 3, Jake, number 4, Peppers, number 5, Pumphrey. And also, of course, Jonathan Allen, a very good defensive player, is somewhere on that list. Let's close out our college football section of this podcast with the current college football playoff rankings. We'll tell you who's trending upward for 11 through 25. Then we'll give you our picks for 1 through 10 for anything that's going to move. Let's start with Washington State, definitely trending up. Huge win against Arizona. Number 24, Boise State. The thing with Boise State is that they're really out of contention at this point, but they had a nice win. I'll say trending upward. Western Michigan definitely trending upward. Number 22, Florida State, I'd say trending downward because they didn't have a very strong win over NC State. Number 21, UNC, say trending upward, big win. Number 20, West Virginia. I'm going to say stay the same because when you're playing Kansas, anyone can look good. Number 19, Virginia Tech, I've got to say trending downward, barely escaping from Duke, and Duke is not the best team in college football. They're great in basketball, I'll give them that, but college football, not really. Number 18, Oklahoma State, and I've got to say trending downward because Kansas State kept things really, really close. Number 17, Baylor, trending downward out of the rankings. They lost big against TCU. They do not deserve to be in these rankings. People were talking about them getting into the college football playoff before. Now look at what's happening. Number 16, Utah trending. With Utah at this point, it's Utah, because of everything that's going on and all that, they didn't play this week, and so because of that, I'm just going to say trending upward. Because if you didn't play and there's movement up at the top, I've got to say trending upward a little bit. Maybe it's barely trending upward. Maybe they move up a spot. Number 14, Oklahoma. I've got to say trending downward because they barely escape Iowa State. But a W is a W, so you can't really move them down too far. Number 13, LSU. They kept things close against Alabama, but I was not a fan of the repetitive play calling. It was not very good play calling on offense. Their defense looked good, but your defense can't hold you up for 4 quarters. You have to have some offense. want to say stalemate. They played good. Death Valley against Alabama. So I want to keep them at the same spot. Number 12, Penn State, huge win over Iowa. Definitely trending upward. Number 11, Florida, definitely trending downward after losing big against Arkansas and Fayetteville, 31-10, not very impressive. Number 10, Nebraska, definitely trending downward. They got whipped by Ohio State, 62-3. Yeah, it's at the Horseshoe, but it's still a very good job by Ohio State downing Nebraska. I never really thought Nebraska was really that top-tier team. And I've got to say they're trending downward for sure. Number 9, Auburn, trending downward because they barely escaped Vandy. At the same time, I don't think they're really going to move downward because of all the movement up in the rankings. Number 8, Wisconsin, trending upward. Nice job on defense, but they've got to figure out that offense against the Northwestern Wildcats at Ryan Field. Number 7, Louisville, trending upward. Nice win, but they're not really. I think they may move a spot. Number 6, Ohio State. I think they might be given the go-ahead over Washington to get into that playoff. We know that Texas A&M's moving out, number 4, so they're definitely trending downward. But could Ohio State jump Washington? That's a good question, and it's something to think about here, and they're definitely trending upward. Number 5, Washington, definitely trending upward. Number 3, Michigan, they're the same, big win. Number 2, Clemson, they really can't be trending upward, so they stay the same. Number 1, Alabama, I'd say trending upward once again, but they can't really move up. So, number 3 are the top 3 are a deadlock, but let's see our predictions. We'll start at the bottom, these deadlocks. Number 1, Alabama. Number 2, Clemson. Number 3, Michigan. Texas A&M's going to move down, so let's take a look at who I would put in there. I've got to give the go-ahead to Ohio State. Big one against a ranked team. I think they might creep into number 4. Number 5, Washington. Number 6, Louisville. Number 7, Number 7, I've got to go Wisconsin. Number 8, Auburn. Number 9, I'm probably going to, let's see. I'm going to put Penn State, jumping a couple there. Number 10, I'm going to put Texas A&M. Not very impressive, but I'm just going to move them up there. So that's my top 10. And now let's take a look at our NFL predictions. And for today and Monday Night Football, tomorrow night. And let's take a look at our schedule. Of course, this is week 9 of NFL action. And we started out with the Falcons taking on the Bucks on Thursday night. And the viewership, it's an interesting subject here. The viewership for the NFL's gone down. There's several theories. The injuries, maybe Peyton Manning leaving, so the worst quarterback play. But I think it may have to do with these terrible Thursday night games. I mean, the NFL Network wants to attract viewership. Well, if you're going to attract viewership, why don't you have a better game than a game that everyone knows someone is going to win by a good margin? So let's take a look at our game, what we have here. 1 p.m. on Fox, and of course you won't all be able to watch these. You need DirecTV's NFL Sunday ticket to have access to all these games. Now, we're not a fan of that here, but I mean, it's a way to generate revenue, and that's really what the NFL is all about. So we have the Lions taking on the Vikings. The Vikings losing 2 straight, including one to Chicago. The 2-6 Bears, they're taking on the 4-4 Detroit Lions. The Detroit's just mediocre. I think the Vikings bounce back at home. And then we've got the Eagles taking on the Giants. And the 4-3 Eagles and the 4-3 Giants, I've got to go with the Eagles here. I think the Eagles are a better team. I think they get the win. And they barely lost last week, of course, in overtime against Dallas. They had a huge win over the Vikings 2 weeks back. I think Eagles are a solid team. Then we have the Jets taking on the Dolphins on CBS. By the way, Eagles and Giants are on Fox. And these are two terrible teams. I was not impressed by these teams at all. I'm gonna just have to go with the Dolphins. I think they're at home. They have a better rushing attack. I think they do get the job done. Another 1 p.m. Eastern game on CBS. We have the Chiefs taking on the Jaguars, and the Chiefs are solid, 5-2. The Jaguars not so much, 2-5. And I like the Chiefs. They're consistent around defense, offense, really everything's pretty consistent. And the Jaguars just are not good at some things. While you could say the Chiefs are consistent with everything, I'm gonna go Chiefs are a good team around. When you bring in everything, that's why they're 5-2 right now. They're not the most elite at everything. They're not the most elite at one thing, but they're mediocre around the board instead of like mediocre here, really good there, and terrible here. So that's why I like the Chiefs. Another 1 p.m. Eastern game on Fox. We got the Cowboys and the Browns. The Browns had not won their first game against the best team in the NFC, the Dallas Cowboys. Don't think they're going to win any game against them Cowboys. Cowboys win big, and they move up to 7-1. Browns continue to fall 0-9. Exactly what Chicago Cubs fans would like to rub in Cleveland sports' face to see the Browns lose the entire NFL season. That would be pretty interesting. But I think the Cowboys win big. Then we have the Steelers taking on the Ravens. And on Big Ben's status, let's take a look at that. He is questionable, and it's a game time decision. We're not sure if he's going to play yet. So, but if he doesn't, then that could change my pick. I'm not impressed really by what the Ravens have done. I think they continue to lose. I've got the Steelers. That's 1 p.m. Eastern on CBS. And we've got a few good 4:05, 4:25 games. Let's start with 4:05 p.m. Eastern. We've got the Saints taking on the 49ers. 49ers have not been impressive, and I've got to go with the Saints. They're really good on offense, and their defense is lacking, but guess what? 49ers defense is lacking too. So I've got to go Saints pretty big in that one. 4:05 p.m. Eastern as well. Panthers 2-5 taking on the 3-4 Los Angeles Rams. And, the Panthers look pretty good when it comes to all these rankings, but their record does not show it. I think the Panthers get a win in L.A. And now 4:25 p.m. Eastern, Colts taking on the Packers at Lambeau. It's one I look forward to watching. I've not been impressed by either of these teams this year, and I think it's at Lambeau Field. It's 47 degrees Fahrenheit. It's sunny. This is what Green Bay football is all about. Give me the Packers. And also 4:25 p.m. Eastern on CBS, we've got the Titans taking on the Chargers. The Chargers have, their record doesn't show it. They're 3-5, but they've been pretty good overall, in my opinion. But I think that Titans' big offensive attack does give the Titans a win. I think it's a very close game, but in the end, I've got the Titans getting the job done over in San Diego Qualcomm Stadium. Then we have the Broncos at the Raiders. It's going to be 8:30 p.m. Eastern, Sunday Night Football on NBC primetime stage. This is pretty big. Broncos 6-2. The Raiders are 6-2. Of course, it's not fun to play at the Oco Coliseum, but here, let's take a look. I've actually, the Broncos' defense is big. The Raiders' offense is big. I think the Broncos have enough defense to stop this Raiders' offense enough for Trevor Siemian and company to get the job done. Then Monday Night Football, Bills at Seahawks sounded really good at the beginning of the season. When you look at the records, not so much. Bills sitting at 4-4. Seahawks sitting at 4-2-1. This is in Seattle. And I'm too impressed by that Seahawks defense to give the win to the Bills. I think Seahawks get the W on election night. And that's going to do it for episode 8 of Gridiron Glory. I'm Alexander Cook Wolfgang, unable to make it today. And please follow us at the Football Kids. That's at the Football Kids. We'll give you all the live updates you need for your NFL and college football days. And we'll alert you whenever we upload our latest podcast. But if you really want to be alerted, and if you really want to show your support for these kids who are just trying to, you don't have to, go buy your cable and watch all those games. Just cut the cord and listen to our podcast. Doing this for you. We're not getting paid for it. And if you really want to show your support and get updated every time we upload a new podcast, please become our first subscriber. It would mean so much to us, and trust me, we would really appreciate it. And also, please check out our blog at gridironglorysportsblog.weebly.com. Thank you for listening to our latest podcast. This is episode 8. From the studio, I'm Alexander Cook, saying so long and enjoy your NFL Sunday.